Water has always been my sanctuary. Since childhood, when my father first taught me to float on my back in our neighborhood lake, I've found a unique peace and submersion that I could never achieve on land. The gentle pressure against my skin, the muffled sounds, the weightlessness. Swimming allowed me to escape my thoughts, my anxieties, and sometimes, it seemed, gravity itself. After moving to Millbrook for work 3 years ago, finding the right pool became almost an obsession. I visited every facility in a 30-mile radius before discovering the Cedar Heights Community Center. It wasn't the newest building, constructed in the late 70s, with that particular architectural style that somehow managed to be both brutalist and forgettable, but it had character. The high ceilings with exposed beams, the mosaic tile work around the edges of the pool depicting stylized waves and marine life, and most importantly, the evening hours. Open until 10 p.m. on weekdays, it was rarely crowded after 7. I established a routine, arriving precisely at 8:13 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. Why 8:13? A small superstition. It had been laying 13 minutes into my first swim there, when I experienced that perfect moment of flow, when my stroke aligned with my breath, when my body seemed to cut through water without resistance. I chased that feeling twice weekly, with religious dedication. Last Tuesday began like any other. The mid-October evening brought a premature darkness and a sharp chill that made the warmth of the community center's lobby especially welcoming. Martha, the elderly woman who usually worked the front desk, greeted me with her customary nod. Her fingers, gnarled with arthritis, moved with surprising dexterity as she scanned my membership card. "Just you tonight, I think," she said, glancing at the check-in sheet. "Ryan's on lifeguard duty. Said nobody's been in for the past hour." I smiled, pleased at the prospect of having the pool to myself. Perfect. The changing room was empty, the artificial brightness of the fluorescent lights making the white tiles gleam with an almost clinical sterility. The familiar scent, a mixture of chlorine, industrial cleaner, and the faint mustiness endemic to public pools, filled my nostrils as I changed into my navy blue swim trunks. I caught a glimpse of myself in the full-length mirror, 37 years old, still reasonably fit though softer around the middle than I'd like to admit, dark hair beginning to recede slightly at the temples. Just an ordinary man with an ordinary life, seeking the extraordinary feeling that only water could provide. I showered quickly, letting the warm water prepare my skin for the cooler temperature of the pool. As I passed through the footbath, I noticed Ryan, the lifeguard, a college student working part-time, always buried in textbooks during his shift, sitting in his elevated chair. He gave me a half-hearted wave without looking up from his physics homework. I didn't mind his inattention. I was a strong swimmer, and we both knew it. Standing at the edge of the pool, I observed the water with the appreciation of a connoisseur. The overhead lights reflected off the surface in undulating patterns, creating the illusion of movement, though the water was perfectly still. 6 lanes stretched before me, divided by floating blue and white markers. I always chose lane 3, not too close to the wall, not too central. My lane. I placed my towel and water bottle on the bench, performed my usual quick series of stretches, and approached the edge. The pool area was silent except for the ambient hum of the filtration system and the occasional turning of pages from Ryan's direction. Peace. I dove in with practiced form, the water parting around me in a familiar embrace. But as my body fully submerged, I felt the first indication that something was different. The water had a peculiar viscosity, not dramatically so, but noticeable to someone who had swum in this same pool over 100 times. It felt heavier somehow, as if its molecular structure had been subtly altered. I surfaced, wiping water from my eyes, and chalked it up to a change in the chemical treatment. Perhaps they had switched brands of chlorine, or adjusted the pH levels. The first few laps were uneventful, though I couldn't shake the sensation of swimming through something slightly thicker than water. My muscles worked harder than usual, and I found myself breathing more heavily after completing my warm-up. I paused at the shallow end, hands gripping the edge, and glanced toward Ryan. He remained absorbed in his studies, oblivious to my momentary struggle. I pushed off the wall from our main set, determined to find my rhythm. 3 strokes in, I felt it, a distinct pressure against my right calf, like fingers brushing against my skin. I stopped mid-stroke, treading water, and looked around. The pool remained empty save for me, the water clear enough to see the black lane markers at the bottom. I laughed nervously, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. Just seaweed brain, I muttered to myself, using the swimmer's term for when your mind plays tricks on you during long swims. I resumed my workout, focusing intensely on my technique to distract from the lingering unease. Left arm, right arm, breathe, kick. Left arm, right arm, breathe, kick. The mantra of movement usually calmed me, but tonight it felt like reciting a protective incantation. For laps later, halfway across the pool, I felt it again. Not a brush this time, but a definite grip, 5 distinct pressure points around my ankle, squeezing briefly before releasing. I jerked my leg upward instinctively, breaking my stroke and swallowing a mouthful of water in the process. Coughing and sputtering, I made my way to the side of the pool, clinging to the edge while trying to process what had happened. I scanned the water intently. The pool lights illuminated every corner of the basin. No debris, no stray equipment, nothing that could have wrapped around my ankle. Ryan finally looked up from his book, raising an eyebrow. "You okay there?" he called, his voice carrying across the water. I nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, just got a cramp. I'm fine." He shrugged and returned to his studies. I remained at the edge, my racing heart gradually slowing. Had I imagined it? The sensation had been so distinct, so physical. I ran my hand over my ankle where I'd felt the grip. No mark, no pain. Just smooth, wet skin. The rational part of my brain offered explanations. A muscle spasm misinterpreted by my nervous system, a momentary circulation issue, or simply the water pressure changing as I moved. Yet something more primitive within me whispered warnings. I considered leaving. The thought of gathering my things and heading home to my safe, dry apartment was intensely appealing, but there was also a sense of defiance rising within me. I wouldn't let an unexplained sensation rob me of my sanctuary. This pool, this routine was mine. I refused to surrender it to fear. With determined strokes, I pushed away from the wall and continued my laps. The water seemed to have returned to its normal consistency, and I began to relax, falling into the meditative state that swimming usually provided. My breathing regulated, my muscles found their memory, and for several blissful minutes, everything was normal. Then the temperature dropped. It wasn't subtle. The water around me seemed to plummet at least 10 degrees in an instant. I gasped at the shock, my body instantly covered in goosebumps despite the exertion. The change was so localized that it felt as if I had suddenly swum into a pocket of ice water in the middle of a warm bath. I stopped swimming and trod water, trying to make sense of what was happening. Could there be an issue with the heating system? But why would it affect only this specific area of the pool? As I pondered this, I noticed something strange about the water's surface. The overhead lights were reflecting differently than before. Instead of the diffuse, dancing patterns I was accustomed to, the reflections seemed more concentrated, more defined, almost like separate points of light moving independently of the subtle currents I was creating. I squinted, trying to understand what I was seeing. The reflections weren't following the normal laws of physics. They moved against the ripples, converging rather than dispersing, and they were getting brighter. I looked up, checking if something had changed with the ceiling lights, but they remained as they had been, standard fluorescence and waterproof fixtures. When I looked back down at the water, my heart nearly stopped. My reflection was wrong. I was treading water vertically, arms making small circular motions at my sides to keep afloat, but my reflection showed me in a horizontal position, as if lying face up on the surface. And while I was moving, the reflection was perfectly still. I blinked hard, certain I was experiencing some sort of visual distortion. When I opened my eyes, the reflection had changed again. Now it mirrored my vertical position correctly, but its movements lagged behind mine by a noticeable margin. I raised my right hand slowly. The reflection raised its right hand a full second later. I lowered my hand. The reflection followed after the same delay. I waved. It waved back, languidly, as if moving through something far thicker than water. Then, As I watched in horrified fascination, the reflection's expression changed. My face, but not my face, contorted into a smile I wasn't making. A wide, taut stretching of lips that revealed too many teeth, arranged in a way that seemed subtly wrong. The eyes, my eyes in the reflection, widened to an impossible degree and then narrowed to slits. I was not smiling. I was not changing my expression at all. I couldn't have if I tried. My facial muscles had frozen in terror. The reflection raised its hand again, though my own remained still at my side. It pressed its palm flat against what seemed to be an invisible barrier at the water's surface, as if it were trapped below and I above. The water around its hand rippled outward in concentric circles, distorting the image briefly. When the water settled, the reflection was no longer alone. Behind it, behind me, or the thing wearing my face, other figures had appeared. Dim at first, then with increasing clarity. Dozens of them, pressed together in a grotesque crowd beneath the surface. Men, women, children of various ages, all with the same pallid skin and vacant expressions. Their clothes and hairstyles spanned decades. A woman in a 1950s dress, a child in overalls that might have been from the 30s, a teenager in the grunge fashion of the 90s. Their faces were wrong, bloated and distorted as if they had been underwater for a very long time. But their eyes were alive, alert, and fixed directly on me with a hunger that transcended death. As I watched, paralyzed by a terror so complete that I forgot to keep treading water and began to sink, my reflection's smile grew impossibly wider. It made a beckoning gesture, inviting me down. Behind it, the crowd of faces pressed closer, hands reaching upward, creating a grotesque forest of pale, waterlogged limbs straining toward the surface. Toward me, self-preservation finally kicked in. I turned and swam for the edge with desperate, frenzied strokes. The water, which had felt merely thick before, now seemed to actively resist my movement. Each pull of my arms met increasing opposition, as if the pool's contents were transforming from liquid to gelatin around me. I heard a splash behind me, a sound no mere reflection could make. I didn't look back. My lungs burned as I fought through the resistant medium. The edge of the pool, normally a distance I could cover in seconds, seemed to stretch away from me with each stroke. Ryan remained oblivious, his head still bent over his textbook. "Ryan," I tried to shout, but my voice emerged as little more than a strangled gasp, too quiet to carry across the pool area. I tried again, pushing out the name with every ounce of breath I could muster. "Ryan." He looked up, startled, his expression changing from annoyed to concerned as he registered my distress. He stood from his chair, finally alert to the emergency unfolding in his pool. With one final, desperate lunge, my fingers grazed the pool's edge. I clawed at the tiled border, finding purchase, and began to pull myself up and out. As my torso cleared the water, I felt a violent tug on my right leg, that same five-finger grip, but now with an inhuman strength that threatened to pull me back under. I kicked wildly, my left foot connecting with something solid that had no right to be there. The grip loosened momentarily, enough for me to haul myself fully onto the pool deck, scrambling backward on hands and heels like a panicked crab. Ryan was rushing toward me now, first aid kit in hand, his face a mask of professional concern. "Sir, are you all right? What happened?" I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the pool's surface, which had returned to its innocent calm, reflecting only the ceiling lights as if nothing had happened. No crowd of drowned faces, no mirror image acting independently, just water. I need to go. I managed finally, getting shakily to my feet. Water streamed from my body, forming a puddle on the concrete deck. "I'm sorry. I just need to go." Ryan looked confused, his training clearly not covering whatever he was witnessing. "Sir, you seem to be in shock. Let me help you sit down. Do you have a medical condition I should know about?" I shook my head violently, already backing toward the exit. No, I'm fine. I can't be here right now. I don't remember retrieving my things from the bench. I don't remember changing out of my wet swim trunks or navigating the lobby past a concerned-looking Martha. My next clear memory is sitting in my car in the parking lot, still damp, staring at the illuminated windows of the community center as my body shook with residual terror. 3 days later, I found myself researching the history of Cedar Heights and its community center. The building, as I discovered, had been constructed in 1973, but not as the first structure on that land. Before the community center, the area had been occupied by the Millbrook Reservoir, a small man-made lake created in the 1930s for recreation and emergency water supply. In 1958, following weeks of heavy rain, the reservoir's inadequate dam had catastrophically failed. 17 people who had been swimming, fishing, or picnicking near the water that day were swept away and drowned. The bodies were recovered over the following weeks, but the reservoir was drained and abandoned, the tragedy too painful for the small community to maintain it as a recreational site. 15 years later, the town council had voted to repurpose the land, filling in the remaining depression and building the community center, complete with an indoor swimming pool placed almost exactly where the deepest part of the reservoir had been. I found old photographs in the Town Historical Society's digital archives. Among them was a group picture from 1958, showing summer visitors to the reservoir just weeks before the disaster. I scrolled through the smiling faces and then stopped, my blood turning to ice in my veins. In the back row, slightly blurred but unmistakable, was a woman in a polka-dot dress whose face I had seen beneath the water. And beside her, a teenage boy with a distinctive cowlick who had been among the crowd of pale figures reaching toward me. I never returned to the Cedar Heights Community Center. 2 months after my experience, the facility was closed indefinitely due to structural concerns. The local paper ran a small article about mysterious cracks appearing in the pool basin, allowing water to seep into the foundation. I've moved to a new town now, one without a community pool. I take my exercise in different forms: running, cycling, weight training, anything that keeps me firmly on dry land. Sometimes, when I wash my face in the bathroom sink, I'm careful not to look directly at the water collecting in the basin. I've taken to covering the mirrors in my house when I shower or bathe, because I know now that water has memory. Water holds onto the souls it claims, and sometimes, when the barrier between their world and ours grows thin, they look for new companions to join them beneath the surface. I was lucky. I got away, but I still feel that cold grip around my ankle in my dreams, still see those hungry eyes watching me from beneath impossible waters. And I know, with absolute certainty, that they're still waiting for me. For all of us, water is patient, and the drowned never forget a face. Dear listener, thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. Many more terrifying, mysterious, and thrilling stories are coming soon. See you again very soon.